Hi, everybody. Welcome to the very last day of Culturama. And our first discussion today is with Lloyd Aquino. He's going to talk about how do you get hired as full-time and part-time at a community college? What sorts of things should you do? Lloyd has been teaching at Mount SAC for almost as long as I have, 2003?
2005.
2005, okay. So 7 years after I started, Lloyd started. So he's been there for a while. And he's been on hiring committees. He's one of those people that adjuncts look to in the department. So, Lloyd Aquino.
Thanks, John. So I'm going to be sharing my screen for the majority of this. I've got a Google Doc with all the information I want to share with everybody. And it's going to be a little off for me because when I share, I won't be able to see your faces. So I'm going to open up the chat in case you have questions. Anytime you have questions, just type them into the chat and I'll answer them if I can. There'll also be a chance at the very end of the workshop to ask any more questions that you might have. And anything that I can't answer because I don't have the information, I'll record it into this Google Doc, which I'll share with everybody as well. And anything, sorry, my dog is decided to interrupt. Anything that I'm unable to answer because of confidentiality issues, I'll let you know if that's the case. Okay. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And open up the chat right here. Can everyone see the Google Doc okay?
Yeah, we can, Lloyd.
Okay. And can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. Let me just minimize this as much as possible.
And to remember that we can't see you, or you can't see us.
Yeah. I'm on a loaner computer because one of my dogs was misbehaving yesterday. So yeah, this is a workshop on finding a teaching job at a community college. A little bit to know about me, just shared a little bit just earlier. I've been teaching college since 2003 and got hired at Mount SAC in 2005 as a part-timer. Worked a couple years at Mount SAC, Fullerton College, and Cal Poly Pomona as a part-timer before I got hired full-time in 2007. I actually went through the hiring process twice. The first time I was one of the finalists and someone else was chosen before me. But then I got contacted about a month later with an opportunity to teach 1 year full-time on a temporary basis with no guarantee that I would be hired permanently. So I took that contract. At the end of that year, I had to go through the hiring process again. And thankfully was hired that second time full-time. And this past spring and summer, I served on a hiring committee to hire our latest full-time colleague, Andriana McCall. So yeah, this workshop is very much, as John mentioned a little bit earlier, about trying to make the hiring process, specifically at Mount SAC, as transparent as possible or translucent as possible. So I'm going to share what I've learned myself from serving on the hiring committee, and also from talking with our Dean of Humanities, Carolyn Hoover, and our department chair, Ned Widener. So a lot of the information is going to be coming from them as well. So a quick overview of the hiring process if you've never gone through it before. There are a couple of 4 steps in particular that we go through here at Mount SAC. First is the application packet, which leads into the screening process, where the hiring committee screens all the applications and decides who they're going to interview. Then there's the interview process, which we'll also talk a lot about here. Once everyone is interviewed, who the committee has decided to interview, then a smaller number of candidates are from that pool are selected to do a teaching demo, a 30-minute demo, after which then the committee decides who's going to go on to the final interview with usually the president of instruction at MedSac, but sometimes the vice president as well, or one or the other. And then hopefully at the end of that process, at least one person is hired. I've been told in the past that sometimes that doesn't happen, unfortunately, which, yeah, that's not of course the goal. So we're going to go through each of these 4 steps and tell you what to know about the process and how to prepare for each step of the process. Starting with just some general thoughts about the application process. So when you excuse me, when you are ready to go through the hiring process or to put in an application, you need to know that there are a long list of things that you need to include in your application packet, not just the application itself, but also a cover letter, a CV or a resume, along with a teaching philosophy statement explaining your pedagogy, 3 letters of recommendation, your college transcripts, and if you don't meet the minimum qualifications for the position by the letter, but believe you have equivalency in terms of like you have a different degree or you have work-related experience that is equivalent to the minimum quals that are posted, then you would also turn in an equivalency request. So that's a lot of information to put together.
Hello, everybody.
It's a long process to put that information together. So I want to talk a little bit about some tips on how to kind of navigate through that process quickly, efficiently, making good use of your time. Of course, your application packet needs to give clear information regarding the minimum qualifications and preferred qualifications, and we want to make it clear as possible and as concrete as possible that you do meet the minimum qualifications and that you do also meet at least some of the preferred qualifications. John, did you drop the job posting into the chat?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so if you download the job posting that the PDF that John posted in the chat and open up that document, on page 3 of that file, that PDF file, there's a list of the minimum qualifications and preferred qualifications. The last round of hiring that we did, like I said, in the spring and summer of this year. And we'll come back to that at a later point in our workshop. One of the biggest things that we that you should know about not just your application packet, but every stage of the hiring process is if you're not presenting that information to the hiring committee, they can't consider it, even if you have previous experience working with the people on the committee, even if they were your mentors, even if they were your colleagues, you did team teaching with them, even if they know you and you're teaching really well, they can't take any of that previous knowledge into consideration. They have to go based on what the information that you give them at each stage of the process. So in the application packet, if information is not in the application packet, it can't and it won't be considered by the committee. Does that make sense?
Yes, people are nodding at you. Okay,
good. Sorry, I can't see faces in case you just come into the workshop. So in addition to making it clear that you meet the minimum qualifications and the preferred qualifications for the position that you're applying for, you want to also give as detailed a description as you can of your teaching, who you are as a teacher, what your teaching pedagogy is, assignments that you give your students, readings that you tend to assign, the 2 or 3, maybe 4 qualities of your teaching or characteristics of your teaching that you really want to share with the committee, that you want them to know about you. So one thing that you can do in that sense is make sure that your application packet aligns with the college or university's student body, and the makeup of that student body, the demographics of that student body, as well as the department's philosophy. And if you don't know that information, or you don't know all that information, or you want to know more of that information, it's recommended that you do research. Talk to the department chair, talk to your full-time colleagues, do research on the college and its demographics and its background. That can be really helpful in terms of you providing information in the application packet that makes it clear that you are the right person for the right fit, a good fit for that student body and for that department. One thing, for example, to always think about is, does the college value scholarly research, or does it value teaching? Are you applying to a community college, UC, CSU? And then make sure that your application actually gives information on whatever that college values the most. It's also suggested that in your application packet, when you're describing your teaching, to try to avoid language like I think, I feel, or I try. That language can sound very, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess aspirational, things that you want to do, things that you have attempted to do, rather than things that you actually are doing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And again, stop me at any time if you have questions. The chat disappears off my screen whenever I'm whenever I'm scrolling down, so I can't always see the chat. And then one last suggestion from Carolyn Hoover and also Ned Widener, is that when you're applying for a full-time position, let your dean, associate dean, and department chair know that you're applying, so that they're in the loop, and they can answer questions if they're called about about you, if you're applying, say, on another campus. Yeah. So let me scroll down here. That too. Okay. So how do you apply some of those tips into the different aspects of your application packet? With the application itself, it's mostly straightforward. There's just things that you have to provide information about, and there's not a lot of room for innovation in terms of telling the committee about yourself as a teacher. But there are a couple of places in the application where you can do that. The last round of hiring, on the application, there were 2 questions about equity and diversity. And I wasn't able to get the exact wording of the questions, but basically the questions were asking applicants, how do you incorporate equity into your classroom, and how do you incorporate diversity into your classroom? And of course, with an application and any step of the hiring process, you want to make sure that you stand out as much as possible. So rather than copying a generic statement, maybe something that a committee or a department has put together. Here at Mount SAC, for example, we're working on putting together our in the English department, we're working on putting together our own equity statement as a department. Rather than copying that, you want to try to answer those questions and tell the committee about your equity practices and diversity practices in your own words as much as possible to try to stand out as much as possible. Because if the committee is reading the same generic statement over and over again, then you're not going to stand out, and none of the people are going to stand out. So that's one place. There's also in the application a section called narrative, where you can talk about your teaching pedagogy as well. That space is kind of limited, so there's only so much you can do. So a big place to really talk about your teaching is on your cover letter and the teaching philosophy statement. It's recommended with the cover letter, don't just repeat the information that you provide in your CV. The cover letter is really, again, that chance to get for you to introduce yourself to the committee, and tell them who you are as a teacher. What are 2 or 3 things that you want the committee to know about you? What are you passionate about? What are your goals? This is the cover letter is the space where you can really talk about specific teaching strategies and assignments, because there's not a lot of room to do that, for example, in your CV. So mention, here are the things that I do in the classroom. This is the type of group work I have my students do. This is, these are the type of discussions that we have. Here's some of the assignments that I give to my freshman composition students. Here's some of the things I have them read. And Carolyn Hoover specifically suggested in your cover letter, try beginning and ending with something personal related to your teaching, a personal story that you can share, something that you experienced as a teacher in the classroom, or maybe not in the classroom, or interacting with a student, something along those lines that really, again, show the committee who you are. On the CV or resume, it's important to be as concrete and specific as possible in describing your work experience, and to describe any experience that you think qualifies you, such as courses that you taught, committee work, professional development that you've done, presentations that you've made at conferences or workshop environment, things like that.
Lloyd?
Yes.
Could I jump in here with a question?
Yeah.
How long should a vita be?
I automatically try to think of like a page number count, and I don't think that's the approach to take when it comes to the CV. It should contain all the information about your work experience that you want the committee to know. Okay.
This is something people ask me about, and I've struggled with myself.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What makes it good? What makes it bad? What should you omit? What should you include? That kind of thing.
I would again go back to something like the job posting, for example, and look at the minimum qualifications, look at the preferred qualifications. You want to make sure that the information on your CV aligns with that, or is addressing those aspects. If you're thinking about giving information in your CV about a class that you taught, and it's something that's not mentioned in the minimum qualifications or the preferred qualifications, then ask yourself, is that something that you want the committee to know about you as a teacher, right? So one thing, like for example, that I used to put into my CV, but have taken out because it doesn't really say much, is that how did I put it? That I was responsible for the grading in all my classes. I wanted to make that clear early on when I was a part-timer, that I wasn't just a tutor in the classroom. I wasn't a teaching assistant who didn't actually do any teaching, but just was responsible for grading. So I had that in my CV with the classes that I taught, that I actually did the grading, which, yeah, but that's what all teachers do, right? It doesn't really say a whole lot about me as a teacher that that I graded papers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I removed that from my CV. and it, yeah. Yeah, so if it aligns with the minimum quals or the preferred qualifications, that's good. If it tells the committee something really important about you as a teacher, then it should also go to your CV. Otherwise, I really suggest, recommend leaving it out. It doesn't really need to be there. Yeah. With the letters of recommendation, just a couple things to keep in mind. You want to ask people to write you a letter who can say specific things about your teaching, people who have observed you, who have worked with you in the classroom, or even just on putting together your teaching pedagogy or the scaffolding for your classes, people that you've talked to about those kinds of things. But especially people that you've collaborated with on projects, committees, team teaching, people who can really tell the committee in their letters, this is who this person is as a teacher. This is what they do in the classroom. This is what they value. This is what they care about. These are the things that they are good at. The more specific information that they can give, the better off that is for you, because again, it's going to make you stand out that much more. Because it's coming from another source, not just from yourself. And then something that I'm not sure a lot of applicants really consider when they're putting together the application packet is to ask people who've been on a hiring committee or a search committee for feedback on your application packet as you're working on it, or after you've completed it, when you're ready to, before you're ready to turn it in. People with experience screening applications, looking through applications, who know what that part of the process is like on the other side of the coin. We can't talk with you about what we've seen in other people's applications, but we can tell you about things that we think are really going to make you stand out and really really attract the attention of the committee when they are looking at your application packet, based on our previous experience. John, you served on a couple committees too, right?
I've served on tenure committees, but no hiring committees.
Oh no, okay. And you can definitely ask any of the full timers on NSAC if they've served on a hiring committee. They can't tell you anything about that experience, but they can definitely tell you that they have done it. And then that's somebody that you might be able to ask to review your application packet. Speaking of the committee, actually, before we do that, does everyone have the job posting file opened up on their computer?
Yep.
Is everyone on page 3? Let me stop the share for. Does everyone scroll down to page 3 of that document? Page 3, the notifications that I keep bringing up and preferred are on the job posting announcement. Does anyone have any questions about any of the required qualifications or preferred qualifications? For example,
So I think I have a question. I'm not sure if Lloyd frees up or not. But my question would be, you said we can approach people who've been on like the hiring committee about our application, stuff along those lines. Do you, like, if I came up,
as long as oh, go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just wondering how what would be the best way to approach that to not make it awkward or something along those lines, or do something that we shouldn't.
I guess it depends on your level of familiarity with that colleague. If there's someone that you're familiar with, you have a previous relationship with, it's a person in their office, and just ask. If it's somebody that you don't know that well or at all, I would suggest sending them an email. kind of a very professional email. We're putting together an application packet, and I'd like to have some people look at before turning it in. Have you served on a hiring committee or search committee before? And would you be available to do that? That kind of thing. Just very formal, a very formal request in the form of an email. I forgot to mention, and that's why I started to cut you off, Tanner. Sorry about that. The only exception for anyone who has been on a hiring committee or search committee where they won't be able to look at your application, obviously, is if they are planning to serve on a committee in the immediate future. So they might be a candidate for the new committee that comes up that you're actually applying for. So in that case, they can't look at it, right? So or give you any feedback on it. So that's just something to be aware of. Any other questions along those lines or about the minimum qualifications or qualifications? Also, am I talking too fast? I can never tell. So
You're good, man.
Okay. It's really hard to do this, and I can't see anybody's faces. So at least when I'm not sharing, I can see blank screens, and that helps a little bit. I'm more used to that than I have to just not seeing anybody. Okay, so let me go back to the share and tell you a little bit about the committee itself. So at Mount SAC, a hiring committee or search committee consists of a couple of different people. You have, of course, a number of tenured faculty members, which depends on the department, how many members, and they'll mostly be from the department that's doing the hiring, unless you have a really small department on campus where there just aren't enough full-timers to fill the committee adequately. Since the Mount SAC English department is one of the biggest departments on campus, along with math, you'll probably see anywhere between 3 to 4 tenured faculty members on the committee. Usually, but not always, one of those faculty members is the department chair. Then there's a representative from the humanities division, either the dean or associate dean serves on the committee. There's an EEO representative. And I'll explain what their duties are on the committee. And the job posting itself is assigned to a specific human resources officer, who's kind of the point of contact for everybody involved in the hiring process, not just the committee, but also for anybody who's applying. All committee members must be approved by the academic senate. And diversity is a key criteria. They look at the overall makeup of the committee, everyone's backgrounds, and if the committee doesn't show enough diversity, then the Senate will request replacements for some of the committee members. So that part of that's just the EEO requirements of it all. The EEO rep ensures that every candidate is given equal time and consideration in each stage of the selection process. So during the application screening, making sure that every committee member has given due consideration to every application that's come in. During the interviews, the EEO rep makes sure that every candidate that's interviewed gets an equal amount of time, and that nobody's given more time than the others. Same thing with the teaching demo. And the final interview as well. So they're just making sure that everyone's playing fair and not showing any bias or favoritism towards any of the candidates. As I mentioned, the human resources officer is the point of contact for the committee, but also for anyone who's applying. So any questions that you have during the hiring process, at every stage of the hiring process, you would contact human resources and tell them this is the job that I'm applying for. I want to know more information about what's going on. And then they would direct you to the officer that's in charge of that job posting. And as I've mentioned several times, all the community members are required to keep all the information about the selection process confidential. We can't even talk about it with each other outside of the committee or yeah, sure, stop. Or after the committee has selected a candidate, selected a finalist. Any questions about the makeup of the committee or the duties of the committee? Okay. Once applications are screened, then the hiring committee selects candidates for interviews. Interviews are scheduled. Interview candidates are all given the same time limit. At Mount SAC, it's 1 hour. Before the interview, if you are selected for an interview, you may be required to complete paperwork, which can include things like grading a sample essay or writing an essay yourself about your teaching pedagogy. It may be either of those things, it may be none of those things, it may be something else completely. Those are just a couple of examples. And you will be given time to review and prepare for the hiring committee's questions. They're given to you basically like an hour in advance. So you can review them, take notes on what you want to say, how you want to answer those, and start thinking about things like time management. How am I going to answer all these questions in the time frame that I'm given? Oh, and also it's the same questions for everyone who's interviewed. So some tips for the interview is prepare well ahead of the interview due date. And once you're contacted about the interview, we recommend that you prepare as best as you can. Keep in mind that you are being interviewed by a committee rather than just one or two people. And that's a very different experience. I've had interview experiences on both sides of that, where it was just one or two people that were interviewing me, and then having a whole committee of 6 or 7 people asking questions. Just in terms of the interpersonal aspect of it, having a committee of 6 or 7 people asking you questions, maintaining eye contact with everybody, making sure that you're what's the word I'm looking for? That you're interacting with everybody. That's just different when there's that many more people in the room, and it can also be really intimidating to have that many people, especially if you're not expecting it. As I mentioned, I went through the hiring process at Mount SAC twice before I got hired full time, and I was definitely a lot more comfortable the second time around because I knew walking into the interview that there was going to be a large group of people in the room, which I didn't know the first time. So yeah, that was a very different experience. You should examine the job posting. What I was told by both Carolyn Hoover and Ned Widener is that the questions that the committee asks the candidates is based on the job posting. So you can examine that, try to predict as best as you can what questions the committee might ask. What are the things based on the job posting, not just the qualifications, but all of that. What are the things that the community is looking for, and try to prepare that way. Also, in terms of preparation, you want to be ready to talk about yourself and your teaching. So what are the most important things, or the most important thing that you want the community to know about you? And where in the interview are you going to emphasize that, stress that, talk a lot about that? What are some stories and experiences from your teaching that you should have ready to share? Because of course you always want to give specific concrete examples of your teaching as best as you can. And practice interviewing, practice with someone who you trust, and possibly even someone who has served on a hiring committee or search committee. So not just asking them if they can review your application, ask them if they can help you through a practice interview. We can't tell you what questions we've asked the people that we interviewed or when we were on the committee, but we can draw on that experience and craft questions that the committee that you're going to be interviewed by is likely to ask you. Let me stop the share here. So yeah.
I have one question that piqued my interest. As you select candidates, do you have like a certain number that you like say goes through each round or something along those lines? To where it's like, let's say we have like a pool of applicants, like we're going to select 10 from here, and then we're going to select 5 from here or something like that.
There's never a predetermined number. It very much depends on the pool and what the candidates share about themselves during each stage. And then there's things like time constraints. You know, there are deadlines that have to be met. Things that the committee has to take into consideration. So sometimes just time limitations affect that.
Does it ever go into like an extra stage to where, like, I know it's usually like, from my understanding, based off what you said, it's like 3 rounds. Does it ever go into like a bonus round or anything like that, to where it's like we really don't know who we want to go with?
There's no bonus round. What will happen if the committee gets to the final to the stage where they need to select at least one candidate for the final interview? It's possible, and it has happened in the past. I've been told that committees have decided that they didn't want to forward a candidate for final interview. What would happen in that instance is the whole process would start over again. They would ask for applications again and start from scratch.
Gotcha.
So if that were the case, there would be a new job posting. You would have to reapply and go through the whole process one more time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
I wonder if we could talk about, I was grading a little bit, so I didn't hear all of it. Did you talk about hiring part-timers? Because we have one person here who wants to be hired as a part-timer.
I could right now. I guess now would be a good time to, because it's not as involved in process. So depending on the campus, there are different processes. From what I understand of Mount Sacs process, you don't need an application to apply to be part-time. You just need a CV or resume. You would turn that into the department, and there's a pool of CVs and resumes that are kept on file for whenever the department is looking for part-time adjunct instructors. The department chair would then go through that file and select people to interview. That interview process at Mount Sac tends to be more of a conversation rather than actual interview questions or things like that. It's more just a, get to know you a little bit better kind of thing. What are you interested in? What do you, why do you want to teach on at our campus? Things like that. And maybe John, you can share yours as well. When I was hired part-time by the chair at the time, Gary Yankee, we just talked about plays that we liked because he saw on my resume that I had a focus on dramatic literature for my master's degree. So we just talked about plays. And at the end of like 5 or 10 minutes of talking about plays, he offered me a couple of classes. So it was as simple as that. I've been on other campuses where the process is a lot more formal. Fullerton College was very much like that. It was a very formal process. I met with the chair and also the dean at the same time. and they went through very specific questions. They were also very stone-faced, so it was hard to read them. So I was very surprised the next day because I thought I'd bombed the interview. I was very surprised when they called me and offered me classes because I thought, oh, man, they don't like me at all. John, what about you?
Yeah, so Mount Sac was very much the same. I did it 6 months before I graduated, and I think that's a good idea. Know that you want to do it. You're not going to get classes right this second, usually. I've been hired at a few. I think I've taught at 7 or 8 colleges, and it's almost always at Mount Sac. It was Kathy Hinkins and Gary Yankee at the time. Kathy was I think much, I don't know, not as carefree as Gary is. I don't want that to come off as an insult because I love Kathy. She's fantastic. But she's a very serious person. She's always on point. But even then, it was more of like we sat around talking about just my student experience at Mount Sac, and we talked a little bit about why I want to teach and how I got this. I've been in a couple of places where it was a little bit more serious, but every single time I walked up, introduced myself, handed them the resume or the Vita, and we had a conversation right there. And I think that's a really important thing. And I think the reason is this: that you get into a department, it's a very close relationship you're going to have with your other colleagues, and part of what they're looking for is, are you just a really hard person to work with?
Yeah.
I saw somebody who applied and then sent 15 texts in a row, like within the space of 2 minutes, and like there's no way that person's going to get hired. It's just such a seems like a really difficult person to be around, and so that's, I think, a big part of it. And then the teaching, you can't really check at the time. You have to check in within the first semester, see if the person's doing a good job teaching, see if that person will be hired.
And it's usually generally the approach that as I understand it with department chairs is they're not so much looking for, like you said, work experience or teaching experience. That'll come. Yeah, they're just looking for an who do you think would take advantage of the opportunity to teach, and possibly grow from that. And I think there's a really good understanding on all campuses, really, that somebody who's hired to teach adjunct is going to learn and grow. And there's things that they don't know right now at the time they're hired that they will learn once they're in the classroom, depending on how much experience they have. I always tell everybody who's thinking about applying part-time that there's a world of difference between having no teaching experience and even having just one class that you've taught. There's such a huge gap of knowledge between those two levels of experience, because there's so many things that you learn instantly when you're in a classroom as a teacher that you don't know until you actually start doing it. So yeah, that's the process. It's we don't need to go into like the fingerprinting and all that, because that's yeah. I don't think anybody has any. I hope nobody has any questions about that. Although I know a lot about fingerprinting from a previous job. So,
so I've got 2 more points to add. First, Mount Sac is generally a difficult place to be hired in because everybody wants to be here. It's good pay. It's stable. It's kind of central to a lot of people. So a lot of people want to teach here, and so therefore it's difficult getting your first job at Mount Sac. It's much easier to go out to a place that on the fringe where fewer people live, like Norco or I mean, I don't know what to call it, the fringe, but you know what I mean. There's like a lot of colleges here, a lot of people living in this area who are qualified to teach. Fewer people in, say, Victor Valley College, which is a great college. I don't mean that as a burn. It's just there's no university up there that people are going straight to that thing. The closest, I think, would be San Bernardino. I could be wrong.
also just out there. So
also, before getting into part-time teaching, you should know how bad the pay is. It's incredibly bad. Lloyd and I are literally making 10 times the amount of part-timers, which is, I think, absolutely disgraceful. It's really not very good way to make a living in terms of money. And it's hard to get the full time. So I balance that out by teaching at universities. State universities tend to pay well. UCs pay better than CSUs. CSUs tend to be really, really stable, especially Cal State LA, Long Beach. And Victor, I'm going to mute you. Cal State LA, San Bernardino is really stable. Long Beach, Cal Poly kind of is unstable. Sometimes they'll lose all their adjuncts in a semester. That happened several times. Okay, so very few benefits too. So it's got to be absolutely, you want to go into that with your eyes open. I think you were surprised by that, Tanner.
Yeah, when I was thinking about career decisions and things along those lines, I was like asking myself the question, is this a lucrative career, things along those lines? And I knew full-time was like definitely, but then I was like also thinking about like, oh, what if I was just doing adjunct work? And then you see like this like $60 an hour signing, you're like, whoa, this is lucrative, this is gonna work out. And then you're like, oh, by the way, you get about like 4 to 6 hours a week per class or something like that. So
yeah, it's per teaching hour, which is different than far different than.
Yeah, and there's that to consider too. Mm-hmm.
So I have had several friends who have made whole careers in part-timing for the CSUs because you get rehire rights, you get benefits, and you get good pay. Not great pay, but good pay.
Yeah, one of my best friends has really good rehire rights at Cal Poly, and she's perfectly happy being part-time. Right, has been, has no ambition at this time to apply for a full-time job. It fits really well with her life right now. So, yeah.
Yeah, my friend is retiring this year after a 25-year career with Cal State LA. It's like she's got retirement benefits.
At the same time, for other people, I know this is the case for me. It can be really emotionally and mentally taxing to be a part-timer. Especially here in Southern California, you're a freeway flyer, going from campus to campus to campus, keeping track of all the differences between campuses. 1A freshman comp is not taught the same at Fullerton College. It's not even called the same thing. And it varies from campus to campus to campus. The schedules are not aligned. Some places are on the quarter system, some places are on semester, but different types of semester lengths and things like that. What's there? Oh, and then also you don't know from term to term how many classes you're going to get offered, so you don't know what your income is going to be. There were times where I had 3 or 4 classes, and then there were times where I was offered 10 classes on like 5 different campuses, and I made better than decent money teaching 6 or 7 classes, but that was a lot on a couple different campuses.
So, I had to do 10 classes one time just to catch up with all the money I owed.
Yeah. The only reason I didn't do more, honestly, at that time was the schedule conflict. Like I already had classes scheduled for that time, so I just couldn't accept more classes. So yeah, that's something else to take into consideration. It's the instability. Got to be prepared for that. So I wanted to kind of have this little breakout session in the middle of the workshop, kind of building off of what I talked about during the preparing for the interview process, going through the job posting and seeing if you could glean what questions the committee will ask you based on the job posting. So everyone now has the job posting. Could you put one more time in the chat, John?
Yeah. I'm sorry, but yeah, let's.
Okay, yeah, I was figuring since the workshop is so small, we don't have a ton of people. We don't need to go into the breakout. But I wanted to give everyone just a couple minutes maybe to look at the job posting and see if you could see what questions you can construct out of that you think a committee might ask you based on what they're looking for. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's maybe, I don't know, 5 minutes, something like that. Yeah, I have about two more steps to talk about, and there's not a ton of information about those last two steps. So. Since I can share my own experience going through the hiring process, I can't share anything about being on the committee. I will say that both times I went through the hiring process, went through the interview, the committee asked me situational questions with one of the committee members playing the role of a student. And that was probably the strangest question both times, because it was a colleague that I was familiar with, and they were pretending to be a student who either was dealing with a difficult issue or going through an emotional breakdown, and trying to be in the moment was very hard. That was not a question that I was prepared for. Also, if you can, maybe type this question into the chat. That might be helpful. Yeah, probably. I think that's a very, very, very likely question that you'll get in a hiring interview. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. You can definitely expect that question. Anyway, just the general form of that. Why do you want to teach at this institution, right? So. Also, I should have put this into my workshop plan. I don't know why I didn't think of it. I just thought of it now. Have any of you been through a hiring interview for a full-time position? No. that just in general, I would say any opportunities that you find that you're interested in, put in an application and see how far you get in the process, because any of that experience can be really helpful for future interviews and things like that. The first time I applied, I had no expectations because I was so early in my career. I had no expectations about actually getting hired, but I wanted to know more about the process on the applicant side. Just what is it? I just wanted to see how far I could get. Go through a hiring interview, go through whatever the next steps were after that, so that when I felt more ready, I would be more ready. That was the idea.
Yeah, you can also ask your local friend professor if he'll give you mock interviews.
Yeah, practice interviews. So did anyone come up with any more questions that they think a committee might ask based on the job posting?
I think I want to add something. And I think it's if your person's got a lot of qualifications, like say you're doing really interesting and advanced work in literature, make sure you make it clear that you want to teach at community college, that it's not some sort of consolation prize to you, because there are those who will see it that way, right? And I don't
No,
know.
definitely. No, definitely, yeah. Definitely it's easy to get that impression that somebody is, because they're overqualified in a sense, that they're hedging their bets a little bit. You know, if they don't get that job that they really want, then maybe they'll get this job. It's easy to get that impression just based on an application. So yeah.
Yeah, but before you, Lloyd, we had somebody who came in and had those qualifications, and he's a wonderful person. And he worked for a year while he got his stuff together for the university. Then after a year, went to the university.
Mhm.
That's where he really wanted to be. And he teaches at Cal Poly now.
Yeah, yeah. But also, you never know. Like, I mean, it really is important to put information that you want the community to know about you, because beyond the job posting, you never know what the committee might be looking for or what they might find attractive, right? I know that part of the reason that I was hired full time was because of my interest in creative writing. John told me that's part of the reason that I was hired full time. That they're looking, the department was looking for more people to build a creative writing program at NASDAQ. So I'm glad I included that information in my application packet. Otherwise, you know, they might have gone in another direction. Tanner, what's the overall process you used to teach? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You definitely want to be, like I said, you definitely want to be ready with specific examples of the things that you do. Yeah.
Professor Aquino, quick question. When you said you included like your creative writing aspect somewhere in your application, where did you include that?
That was on my CV. So on my CV.
Oh, you put it on the CV?
Yeah, on my CV, I made it clear that I had taught a creative writing class for a summer program.
Okay.
That's part of my teaching experience. And then also I listed, I'd gotten some poems published. I'd done a couple of poetry readings as a featured reader. So I had that in my application, in my CV as well. And, you know, apparently those are things that stood out to the committee. So yeah,
Gotcha.
I didn't have a whole lot there because I don't have an MFA. That's just my background. But
Also, like we knew you, and we had a sense of who you were.
Yeah, there's also that part of it too. I mean, I've been teaching at Mount Tech for 2 years at that point, so they've gotten to know me a little bit. Although, like I said, I can't stress that enough. That the committee can't draw on that previous knowledge. It has to be somewhere in the application.
That's
again,
true.
just avoid things like bias and things like that. So um, yeah. We'll talk about the last two steps of the process. Let me go ahead and share my screen one more time. If you do well in the hiring interview, then you are selected to conduct a teaching demonstration. At Mount SAC, the teaching demo is a 30-minute time period. You're given at least a day's notice that you're going to be doing a teaching demo, and you're also given a reading assignment to build a lesson plan around. The really cool thing at Mount SAC, and it's different on other campuses, is that you're actually teaching actual Mount SAC students. Thanks to tenured faculty who volunteer to have their classes participate. They get the reading assignment in advance. So when you walk into the classroom for your demo, they've done the reading assignment, they're ready to go. They're ready to learn from you. And that's so much better than other campuses where, you know, you're doing the teaching demo to the committee. Who aren't students, right? It's the role playing aspect can be difficult to navigate. It's so much easier when it's just actual students. You can tell that they're actual students. When it's time for your teaching demo, remember that you just want to show your teaching. You don't want to tell the committee or the students during your demo what you do. These are the things that I like to do. These are the things that I would usually do. Avoid narrating your teaching and just do the things that you do. That's hopefully that sounds self-explanatory and self-obvious, but you would be surprised how many teaching demos go the narration route. Let the committee experience you as a teacher. Really get to know your teaching as much as you can squeeze into that 30-minute time frame. Focus on 2 or 3 things that you want to demonstrate about your teaching. Do you want to demonstrate how well you engage with students? Do you want to show how well organized you are? Do you want to show off your knowledge of a specific aspect of the job or of the material or something along those lines? Do you want to show them your discussion environment? And how that works. What are the 2 or 3 things that you want to demonstrate? As much as possible, make sure that you're engaging and interacting with the students because they're right there in front of you. And that's one big thing that the committee is looking for. Do you work well with students? So I already said don't narrate, but also don't just lecture, right? You want to ask them questions. You want to have them doing things. You want to give them feedback on those things. It's especially helpful. This was helpful for me the second time around because it was a really good piece of advice that I was given the second time I had to go through the hiring process. Make sure that you have a clear learning objective in mind, and it doesn't have to be a huge thing because you only have 30 minutes, and anybody who's taught knows that that's not a ton of time in the classroom. That goes by so fast. So just a small learning objective. I focused on, for my second teaching demo, I focused on a very specific strategy for analyzing a text. There's just one little thing about how to analyze a text. And then I set the objective very clearly at the beginning of the teaching demo. I modeled it with students and was able to kind of direct them in terms of how this works, how you do this thing. I gave them time to do it on their own with the specific part of the text that I had been given for the teaching demo and that they had read for the teaching demo. And then I gave them feedback within that 30-minute time frame. Here are the things that you did really well. Here are the things that you could work on. And then, of course, time management is the big thing because, again, that 30 minutes isn't a ton of time, and you want to make sure that you are able to accomplish the things that you set out to accomplish. That lesson plan that you put together, that you're able to get through all of it. It's such a disappointing feeling to have a lesson plan put together and then not be able to get through all of it when it comes to that teaching day because it feels like you've you've missed out on an opportunity to really show yourself off as a teacher. So what can you accomplish in that 30 minutes? What do you have the time for? If you're going to ask students to work on their own, how much time can you give them to do that of that 30 minutes? Yeah, that's a huge part of it. Does anyone have any questions? Let me stop the share. So I can see. Does anyone have any questions about the teaching demo and what that will be like? John?
Yeah, so I did a couple of, I applied to Mount SAC a couple of times too. I made a mistake. One of the times I didn't get the job, I made the mistake of I wanted to show off my group work. And so I had them do group work, and I showed up and in somebody's class, and the person, all their students except for 5 people dropped. And so there's no possibility for group work, number one. 2, it really wouldn't have shown off my teaching. It was bad idea to begin with. I had this idea that maybe there'd be 30 people and I'd circulate and talk, but even that wouldn't have been very good.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
This is something that just generally happens, right? I mean, even with our own classes, it's just like how did my mentor put it? My mentor, one of the best pieces of advice my mentor Cal Poly gave me was, sometimes you'll create the perfect lesson plan and the wrong students will walk in the door. And what do you do? Right, you just have to figure it out when that happens. That sucks if it happens during a demo because the stakes are so high. I will say that generally, from my own experience, the 2 times I did a teaching demo, the students were great. They were on the ball. They were on board. They were engaged. They wanted to see me do well. Is the best way I can put it, which was really cool. Because there's always that worry that you're gonna get the wrong students, like I said. So that was that definitely helped a lot to have students who were on board with everything. Anybody else have any questions about the teaching demos? Have any of you ever done a teaching demo?
I feel like my question would be oddly specific, and I'm not sure if it starts venturing into that. Like, does it usually tend to focus like on English composition stuff, like that kind of thing, or is it like trying to focus on like critical thinking stuff? Like, I feel like critical thinking would be kind of hard to venture into in 30 minutes.
I'll tell you from my own experience that it's very open. You're just given a reading assignment and you're told to build a lesson plan around that for 30 minutes. You're not really told what to teach other than that it has to be about that text. So you're given a lot of freedom in terms of what you are allowed to teach. If you want to teach just about that text, you have the opportunity to do so. I would definitely keep in mind what the committee is looking for and what the campus in general is looking for. Right. If it's a community college, typically they're looking for composition professors, right? Because there's only so many literature classes, right? It's different than at the CSU, where they're probably hiring very specifically for a certain kind of, or a UC, a very specific kind of professor, right? With a very specific type of specific knowledge, experience, interest, right? They're looking for an American lit professor or something like that, right? So just keep that in mind. Who's doing the hiring and what are they looking for? With Mount SAC, again, community college, I would recommend focusing on the composition side of things as much as possible, and critical thinking. Those 2 things. Yeah.
So when it was my turn to do this, and I did it successfully, I figured out where we were in the semester, which was week 12 of an 18-week semester, and figured out probably what they were learning and taught to that. And I knew it was an English 1A class. It'll always be English 1A, I believe.
Yeah.
So mine was a mixture of composition and critical thinking. I taught them how to create a cause and effect explanation in the thesis statement.
No, that's a great point too. Yeah, absolutely. Is think about where they are in the semester and where they should be at in terms of their progress. Where this should be at in terms of their progress. That's yeah. You don't want to start with something. You don't want to present something that they learned week 1, right? So. Any other questions? let's talk about the last step then.
Oh, I guess I'm sorry. Just
Go for
one
it.
quick question. So is like the full like hiring committee in there, like 6 to 7 people in the corner, or is it just like one professor just hanging
Nope,
out? Or
it's everybody.
oh
Yeah,
wow, okay,
it's the committee, the professor who teaches the class, who is teaching that class is in there as well. And it's the students, it's everybody. I can share this about my experience because of course I was on the hiring committee during while campuses were closed. All of ours were on Zoom, which was interesting. It was interesting to have teaching demos on Zoom. Yeah, so but yeah, normally it would be you'd be in the classroom and there's just a ton of people in there. That's something else to really take into consideration too. I know that's kind of that has the potential to be very nerve-wracking. Absolutely. So it's good to know to expect that.
yeah, I'll be mentally prepped for that one.
Yeah. I tend to just like in those kinds of situations, even when I'm getting observed by a colleague now, I will try to find a specific moment within that to engage with a colleague. I don't recommend doing that for a teaching demo though, because you don't have the time for that. But that for me helps make things feel a little more comfortable when I'm being observed. It's just like ask the colleague a question or ask the colleague if they have a response to my question or something along those lines or something else to share. Put them on the spot since I'm on the spot the whole time. All right. After the teaching demos, then the hiring committee usually selects at least one candidate for the final interview. Sometimes they'll select more than that. Sometimes they won't select anybody at all. Thankfully, those cases seem to be very rare. Be mindful if you're selected for a final interview that there will be new people participating in that interview who haven't previously been part of the hiring process. So at Mount SAC, the final interview can consist of either the president or vice president of instruction, the dean or associate dean of the department that's hiring will also be in the room. The department chair is usually in there as well. And I forgot to also put the EEO rep. There's also EEO rep in the room. Again, to make sure that everyone is following what they need to follow. Since there are new people in the room, one of the biggest tips when it comes to the final interview is to remember that it's okay to talk about aspects of you as a teacher and your teaching that you've already talked about in previous steps of the selection process. So you've talked a lot about your teaching, you've included all that information in the application, you've shown it in the teaching demo, but you've got 1 or 2 new people who haven't seen any of that. So you have to do it. You have to be ready to share that as much of that as you can again. Also, just keep in mind that just a bottom bullet point, it's important not just to talk about you as a teacher, but kind of give a wider scope of who you are or who you will be as a colleague working in the department, working with others in the department, and as a faculty member on that campus. What are, so there's one more bullet point. What are the things that you want to and can contribute to the campus in terms of committee work, programs and things like that that you want to create for students to participate in, things of that particular nature. What are your major goals inside the classroom, but also outside the classroom, across the campus? It's important to be yourself. And I know that sounds obvious, but in an environment where the stakes are really, really high, you don't want to present yourself as something that you're not. You want to really be true to yourself as much as possible. Because part of the interview and part of all these stages of the process is just to give the people in the room a chance to get to know you. Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. And definitely do what you can to show your passion for the job. What are the things that you are excited about? What are the things that you are looking forward to? What are the things that you love about specific aspects of the job? I know that when I went through the final interview both times, I talked a lot about how much I had connected with the students at Mount SAC in a way that I hadn't expected, because I had originally planned to be a university professor. But the way that I instantly felt so connected and I cared so much about the students at Mount SAC. I just wanted to make sure during the final interview that I stressed that and showed that as much as possible. So I talked about, here are the things that I want to do for students. I wanted to participate in some of the committees that award scholarships to students who are excelling in specific ways. I talked about wanting to be part of the creative writing program in the English department, and some of the things that I felt like I could contribute to that, including, my experience as a part-timer and as a grad student, putting together a creative writing conference of CSU students from across the state. And just like, these are the things that I love to do. These are the things that I want to do. I talked about creating a literary magazine as well, which I eventually got to do for a couple of years after I was hired full time. And passion, show what were the things that you care about and that you love when it comes to teaching.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
I think it's really, really important when we talk about culturally responsive teaching, and that's a big thing today, making it clear that you're going to create an open, welcoming space for students because you love them. That's what culturally responsive teaching is. You don't have to demonstrate that through classes or something, but demonstrate it by the way you speak about the students and how you were,
and talk about this, the student groups that you most want to work with, right? Whether that's LGBTQ or students who are veterans or whatever that population might be, because our populations on our campuses are so diverse, and you can't realistically work with everybody, right? So what are the areas that you can, where you feel like you can make a major contribution and make a major impact with students? So yeah. Yeah. Any questions about the final interview?
Yeah. So it seems like the first two interviews is like, would you be a qualified applicant for the job skill set wise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we feel like you're capable of doing that? But it feels like the final interview is, what is your character and how do we see you fitting into the department? Is that kind of,
and also the campus, because ultimately who's making that final decision on whether or not you get hired is either the president or vice president of instruction.
mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. The committee is, in that sense, the hiring committee is making recommendations about who to hire, and it's up to the vice president or president of instruction to decide, yes, let's hire this person or these people.
I see.
So, and they're thinking big picture. Like I said, they're thinking not just about the department, they're thinking about the campus. Who's the best candidate for the campus?
So do you know what the discrepancies between those two would be, between a department and a campus?
Looks like he's frozen.
Mm.
So the department is all about teaching, all about fitting into that culture. Campus is all about creating, contributing to sort of the development of the college. Would you say that's accurate, Lloyd?
I froze a little bit, so I didn't catch everything you said.
Yeah, he's trying to distinguish campus from department. And so the
Yeah.
campus really wants you to like be a part of the committees that help to run campus.
The programs on campus, right? The support programs on campus as well, right? So, you know, if you want to work with the writing center or in the writing center even,
Yeah, I talked about creative writing, honors, and study abroad, all three of which I've been a part of.
mhm.
So, and
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
one of those was in the department. Two of those had nothing to do with the department. They were about the campus.
Yeah, so that I would I guess recommend that as part of the research. You know, what are the programs on campus? What are they involved in? What do they do? And which programs align with your interests and your passions as a teacher? Yeah.
You know, Lloyd, it occurs to me that the term you keep coming back to is passion, and I think that's probably the most important thing to demonstrate in that final interview.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You just got to show that you want the job. I think that's just a huge part of it. Yeah, and you know, honestly, I can't think of another way to.
Your audio went out.
Yeah, so that's all the information that I have on how getting hired full time and also part time, how it works at Mount SAC. We've got some time for questions if there's some more questions. What questions do you have?
I have one.
Go for it.
So thank you, first of all. This has been really helpful. And so you've talked about just getting hired as a part-time teacher, and you were saying that the interview process is a lot less formal, and that you don't need a lot of teaching experience. Do you think that a TA-ship at an MFA program, is that enough to get a part-time position, or are there other teaching?
That's exactly what I had.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I have to in mind, John.
Lloyd, you broke up there a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to download a file that I could share with everybody. Yeah, I was saying that when I got part-time, I had the same level of experience. I had a TA ship, and that was it. So.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Sure. And I know people who got hired part-time who have no teaching experience whatsoever. Not even a TA ship. So.
Yeah, because you have to get experience somewhere.
Anything else about the process? Anything that I covered that you?
Is there any like major hiccups or anything that you encountered? You were like, whoa, I wish I knew about this ahead of time, or I kind of landed on a landmine accidentally or something like that.
Definitely would help, like I said earlier, to know that there's an actual hiring committee involved. That would have been really helpful. It helped me a lot to know with the teaching demo at Mount SAC that I was working with actual students rather than doing role playing. So much of that was just level of comfort that I knew what to expect, which I hope this workshop has provided. Go ahead, John.
You know what? You're talking about teaching demo. Some are role play. So sometimes you'll go into a campus and it's just 3 teachers watching you, and you've got to. That's really hard. Like how you're trying to engage students who don't exist. You know.
Yeah.
The thing that I did that was just absolutely great is at the time Pam Arterburn was department chair, and I sat down with her for about an hour and talked to her about this. And I talked to her. I talked to a couple of other colleagues too who had been in hiring committees. Okay, this is what you do, right? This is how it goes. So there were no surprises for me.
Yeah. I would say that in the hiring interview, one of the things that I had trouble with the first time specifically were interview questions about how I would deal with a very specific student problem. It was a different problem each time, but just the first time not expecting that question, I found myself like struggling for a response, like trying to grasp at a response and trying to piece one together because I didn't have anything planned in advance for that. So at least the second time around, I knew, okay, there'll probably be a question like that. So I should be ready for something along those lines. I can't remember what the issues were. I remember the second time it was a student who was having an emotional breakdown about something related to the class and the coursework. I can't remember what the question was the first time.
That's hard to answer in the abstract because each emotional breakdown is different.
Yeah. So the way that I finally got to like an answer I felt comfortable with was just to kind of compare it to experiences that I had had. At least in my mind, compare it to that, even if it wasn't like a teaching experience, even if it was something that I learned, you know, working another job or something like that. Well, okay, I dealt with somebody like that in this situation. So how did I deal with it back then? And try to apply that to the scenario or question that was being asked. But like I said, I felt like I was very much the first time fumbling for an answer because I just didn't see that question coming. And maybe I should have. So, John, can you think of anything that might cause a hiccup during the hiring process?
When I have had trouble, it's because I haven't prepared well enough. And it's usually just that, just talking to people on campus, talking to whatever. I've been in interviews on colleges that I'd never stepped foot on before, and it was impossible for me to prepare for that because I couldn't talk to people. There were many states away from where I lived, so there wasn't really anybody to talk to. So when I walked in, and I was befuddled. So trying to, I probably should have, in hindsight, if I actually wanted the job, which I probably didn't, or those jobs, I email some of the people and like contact and ask them how it's going to go, how much can I ask you about this, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so hard to do like any kind of substantive research unless you're talking to people who are on that campus, right? So
yeah.
Any other questions?
If I'm not stepping over anybody else, because I know I already asked the question. But one other question I had was, like, there's obviously going to be a lot of really good candidates applying for the job and stuff along those lines, right? What was it that you felt that you had personally that like made you like, we want Professor Aquino?
I think my big selling point, like I mentioned earlier, was just how much I cared about the student, and that I'd worked with them for a couple of years, and that I was so impressed with the student population. I even talked about in the interview like how the students that I had worked with were excellent in ways even that my university students that I had taught were not. And how, yeah, just how amazing they were, and that I wanted to work more with them, and that I wanted to see them succeed and do whatever I could to help them with that. That was the huge selling point for me. That was my huge selling point, was that I had worked with the population, I'd worked with the students, and I loved the students, and still love them, of course. Thankfully, that hasn't changed in 18 years. But yeah, that to me goes back to the, you know, what are the one or two things about you as a teacher that make you who you are, you know, and just try to emphasize that where and when you can, as much as possible. So, John, do you have anything along those lines?
I think you covered it.
Okay.
We've got 4 more minutes for potential questions.
Yeah. If anybody have any more questions? So far, I've been able to answer all these, so that's good.
Oh, I have another question. Sorry if I'm like jumping in front of other people or whatever. So when did you start teaching something other than English composition and critical thinking? Like when does that open up? And like, is that like, or like, yeah, just curious about that.
So much of it depends on just the campus itself, and what they have to offer and what's available. I know that for the last couple of years in our English department, there have been some literature classes, some of our specialty classes that none of us full-timers have signed up to teach, and then they would then be offered to part-timers. But that doesn't, you can't predict when that happens, from campus to campus. Just want to, you just want to kind of make sure that you're aware of those opportunities when they pop up, and speak up when you find it, when you see an opportunity that you really want to take advantage of. Like when I went on, when I took a semester off on bank leave, none of the full-timers signed up to teach my creative writing poetry class. So I can't remember who the part-timer was that taught it. 2017? Was it you? I thought it was somebody else.
Yeah, I think it was me.
No, I think it was somebody else.
No, I had Jack in there.
Am I thinking of somebody?
Oh.
I thought it was a part-timer.
If it were, it's probably Gregory Chandler, and that's because people know that he's a good creative writing teacher. If you have a specialty, let the chair know. Like, and if your specialty is Bible as literature, you're going to get paid, because none of us can do that.
Yeah. I have no interest in teaching that class.
I would be so bad.
Or the necessary knowledge too. So.
Okay, well, this might be a good ending point, and we can talk off recording if you like. That's something more specific.
Yep.
So we're not going to change rooms. We're just going to stay here for the day. And so you don't have to click off if you want to go to the next thing. The next thing is Robert Peluso is going to teach about how to do a page of comic books. So
Thanks for your time, everybody.